Hi everyone, it's Andy from Hobby Headquarters. Today we're going to be building a small form diorama base. This is a little 12 by 7 inch base that we built up that we're going to use to display our recently built Magach 3 with ERA. Now the Magach 3 with ERA is supposed to represent about 1982 time period and a little bit after that, and about the time of the invasion of Lebanon. So I thought it was a perfect opportunity to build up a little base, kind of do like a dusty, stony outcropping with like a road going downhill with some little bushes and trees like that, kind of representing Lebanon. It's a lot of fun to do. It's fairly easy to build as well, and I think we get some really nice results out of it. So let's get started on it. So I decided to do the diorama base just a little bit larger than the vehicle that we're going to put on it. Now this is a 12-inch by 7-inch board. Now I want the vehicle to be slightly going downhill, but also with having a little bit of a secondary hill right here on the side. So it's kind of like a little road with a little bit of a hillside as it goes down. So I've drawn out my basic lines right here, that this is going to be, you know, the area between the end of the hill and the actual road. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some of our pink foam board and cut this up into shape to properly get this to attach on, to elevate the entire piece, and then we can start working and doing some sculpting. Now I have the general shape of the pieces of foam we want, and you can see how it's going to fit. Now we're going to make the downhill slope on on this piece of board. Now I've taken a marker and sketched out on the foam how we want to cut out so that the downhill angle goes towards this piece. This will also be removed down to a further slope, but I wanted to keep this mark in here until I actually got the slope that I actually wanted. So we'll be cutting about half of the board down on this side and keeping it right up to the very edge on this. So now it's just a matter of taking some sanding, some knives, and cutting this out. Okay, now that we have the general shape roughed out, we can now glue our 3 pieces of foam together. And these little marks and stuff right here, we can sand those down smoother, but actually I find that these little holes and gaps will actually make the plaster and the grout stick much better to the foam. I need to make some rock molds up first, and this is a rock mold from Woodland Scenics. It's got the nice little side here, and we're just going to use some Woodland Scenics, some hydrocal mixed with a little bit of water. Okay, and once you get it mixed up, I mix it up a little bit lighter, a little bit thinner than I normally would, and this is going to help us get rid of our air bubbles. And here's a little trick I'll show you after as well. We're going to pour it in. And once you get it all poured into place, this is a little trick I like to use. I like to put it on the plastic table that I build on. Turn my compressor on right next to it. And what this is going to do is this is gradually vibrating the entire piece, and it's going to force any air bubbles that are inside to rise up from the vibration. So we let that work for a little while. Now that the foam is dried, we're going to mix up a batch of Sculpting. And now we can start applying it to our diorama base. Now I just wet the back of our rock faces, and we're going to push those into the plasters you see right here. We're going to start working it in to get it to blend into the surroundings. Okay, I spent a little bit of time, probably about 15-20 minutes sculpting the piece just the way I wanted, fitting in our rock face right into the side of the hill here as well. And just about, maybe about 25-30 minutes into the process, just as the plaster starts to set up, I took the Magach 3, the one that we're actually going to put on this diorama, and pushed it into to leave our track marks going down the side of this hill. Now, it had a little bit of the pigment still on it, left over from the last build, but that stuff is going to get covered over anyway. But now we have a nice set of Magach 3 tracks pushed into it, as well as all of this is starting to set up pretty well. After it dries, probably overnight, we're going to let it dry. I'm going to come back and sand the entire thing smooth, clean up all the edges, get it nice and clean, and we'll come back and do the next step. And actually, I thought I would also just kind of just show you how the vehicle will drop into place there with the little rock hill in the back, which will put some weeds and things all over it, as well as this little slope coming down here as well. Next, I'm going to start to paint the rock outcropping here. Now, for the colors here, normally you can use a gray, but I've been looking at some pictures of northern Lebanon and central Lebanon, and a lot of the rock outcroppings have a touch of brown to it. So for the color that I'm using as our base coat here, I used 2 drops of XF69 NATO Black, 4 drops XF2 Flat White, and 1 drop of XF64 Red Brown to kind of come up with this kind of a brownish gray mixture. And I did a little experiment on another little piece, and after putting the overcoats on it, I think it looks pretty good, and it matches really close to the real rock that's in that area, which I'll show you a little picture of it here. So I'm going to go ahead and finish and fill up with this first coat, and I'll come back and show you what the next coat looks like. Now we'll start the next little process. I should also point out too, I spent about an hour or so sanding and cleaning up all of the sides of the diorama after all this plaster had dried, and we painted the TS6 to me is flat black, just to coat the entire frame around it. Now I'm using the exact same colors that we used a little while ago, but a little less white this time and a little bit darker tone, and we want to just do some of these little outcroppings, or excuse me, cracks and crevices a little bit darker, and give the paint a little bit of a mottled effect. And hopefully you can see some of this underneath here. And this is just so when we go put the top coats on, it won't look so monotone throughout. And looking at the rocks from that area, they are very quite a bit in color. So we'll let that dry a few seconds and we'll go on to the next coat. Next, we're going to start off with a little XF19 Sky Gray from Tamiya, and using the same brush that we used the other paint on, so it's kind of blending a little bit together. And brushing most of it off on a paper towel or a thing, we're just going to start to do a little dry brushing to get some of the highlights areas to stick out. Now, still using the Sky Gray, we're going to use a touch of white mixed with it, about a 50-50 blend. And this is kind of like a wet on wet type process, because we're not really letting that dry. And using the wet on wet process really helps a lot of this blend together too, so there's no harsh areas that are completely different color. And once again, dry brushing it first onto like a paper towel or a piece of paper, start working it into your paint job. And finally, we're going to use the same mixture again, the Sky Gray, this time with 3/4 of the amount of paint white, and just going to hit some of the highlight points, tops of the rocks that would have a little bit more glint coming off of them. And this is the same dry brushing technique that as modelers we've been using forever on our tanks. It works the same way on rock. And there it is. There's our final look we're going for with the rock outcroppings. Now we can go ahead and paint the rest of the groundwork the brown color. Now we're just going to take our earth undercoat and put a coat of that on here and let it soak into the color of this. Really doesn't matter as much because it's going to get covered over with the grout, but we want to make sure that there's absolutely no chance that there's going to be any plaster that bleeds on through. So now we've mixed up our glue mixture, which is about 50-50 Mod Podge to water, and we're going to put a layer of our glue down. I've also taped off the entire model base so we keep any of the glue from getting on that. And then we have a couple different things we're going to sprinkle on. I have a little bit of fine ballast, a little coarse ballast, and then the main thing we're going to lay down is in this shaker jar is just some sanded grout. Now I'm going to sprinkle some of the coarse ballast around the edge of the outcropping, trying to make it look as rocky as possible. And this is part of the downward slope that's coming down. And then some of the fine ballast to kind of fill in the areas right here. And now just our grout. Okay, now I've sprinkled a little bit more of the sanded grout on here on the top, and we're just going to kind of knock off some of the high point, but we do want some of the sandy color to be blended in because this is a dry, dusty area. So we do want to leave a little bit of the dirt effect around. Okay, we've cleaned out the area where the tracks are going to go, and I've left just enough of the dust behind in certain areas. I should take a tiny bit more out of here. But I do want it kind of like the dirt to be kind of climbing up the wall. Now we're going to take our Mod Podge water mixture. We've added a little bit more water to it and a little touch of dish soap, and we're going to give it a quick little spritz to seal all of this in. Now what I'm doing is I'm just taking some really coarse ballast that has a touch of gray in it to more match what the rock would be coming off. And we're just sprinkling it around the edge here as if that's what's been flowing down off the rock faces. And then we'll set it in place with a little scenic glue and an eyedropper. We've let the scenery dry enough now. Now we can start working on applying a few little weeds and little bushes and things like that. And looking at all the pictures of the Lebanon area where this is supposed to kind of take place, it is actually fairly green. So we're going to use some, in fact, quite a bit of dark green. Now I've poked a few holes into the base here already that we're going to be able to just push these right into place with a little bit of either Mod Podge or white glue on it. And we'll put a little bit of bushes on the side here, as well as some little tufts of grass that we have growing in the rock formations and stuff. And like I said, quite a bit of it was still green. And I've made up a couple of tufts of grass too, using our long 12mm grass that we used in the last diorama. And we'll put a few of those around in there as well. Not too heavy. I was kind of just lining this up too to see how it's starting to look with the backdrop. Really liking the way it's all blending together. So, but before we put the vehicle on, we've got a little bit more to do with the bushes and things like that. Now, using some of our Vallejo pigments, starting off with the desert dust, we want to create an area in through here where it's going to look a little bit more dry and chalky looking. And then where the actual tank is rolled around, we'll put a little bit of a darker color as if it's turned up the dirt. And this is just a matter of just blotting this in. And you don't need to put any type of fixer or anything on it, because just sinking into the grout that's already down there holds it pretty well. So, and you kind of want to have it kind of like a blended surface anyway. So I am going to go ahead and finish up doing this. And once we've applied enough of the dust, we'll just come across with our big soft brush and kind of blend it all together. And we'll also put a little bit up on some of these rocks and things like that, because as if there's a dust layer on all of that stuff. Well, here we are. Here is our completed little diorama. Kind of give you a little spin around it on it there. Just to point out too, the foliage that I use right here was Woodland Scenic's fine leaf foliage. That looks kind of like little trees or bushes, depending on what scale you're trying to use it on. I think it makes a nice little effective little diorama, and we have our Magach 3 all ready to go too. Another thing I went and did is I went and sprayed a little bit extra of XF57 buff on the bottom of this vehicle to kind of blend it into the dusty surroundings that it would fit in with this. Now, I'm debating back and forth about actually attaching it to the base. We can use a little bit of the Vallejo desert sand and just putting a small amount underneath the edge of the tracks on both sides, taking it, pushing it down, having a little bit of it come oozing out the sides, sculpt that into place, and then we can use the same thing again, the dust and the pigments and all that stuff, just to get it back and blend it right into place. That'll also glue the vehicle to the base, so it's a nice little diorama. But I'm not positive yet about wanting to glue it down, so this was more or less about building the actual diorama base, and we'll worry about, because there's backpacks and things like that we could add to the top of this, as well as a big red canvas piece that the Israelis use as air recognition, not to get shot up by their own guys. So like I said, it's a fairly quick, it only takes a couple of days, and that's waiting for product to dry and things like that. It's very effective, I think. I think it looks very, very much like rock and sand, and looking at the pictures I did of the area, it's very, very similar to what would be there. So what I'll also do is, once again, I'll take this outside and shoot some shots of it out in natural sunlight, which always makes things, especially rock work and trees and things, really pop. We'll also have the vehicle on it as well. So I want to thank you as always for watching, and please stay tuned because we have more videos coming.